Okay, guys, welcome back. This week we are talking about the age of oil. This is the next major era in Texas. When we say age of oil, we're really referring to the time period between 1880 to about 1920. This is going to be an era of major economic development for Texas. It's going to change the way Texas is. You guys, I told you guys at the beginning of the year that if Texas were to be its own nation in the world, not just the United States, not as a state, but in the entire planet, it would still be able to function and be on its own and be very wealthy and be very prosperous. And I actually read an article the other day that was talking about this, and it's as of this month, Texas is the 11th largest economy in the world. Now that's pretty significant. So we have a lot of wealth in Texas. We're one of the more better off states when you compare it to others. And a lot of this has to do with one thing: oil. Okay? So, just a quick history on oil in the United States. As early in 1859, oil is going to get discovered in Pennsylvania. A lot of people think that Texas is where oil is discovered in the United States. It's not. It's actually in Pennsylvania. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because before oil is discovered, people were actually using whale oil, and literally from whales. They would hunt whales, they would kill them, they would take their fat or blubber, as we call it, they would boil it down, and they would use the oil to light their cities, their lamps, and everything that they need to light. And it actually almost caused the extinction of whales across the world. Well, when oil gets discovered in Pennsylvania, this is going to change that, because now we have another way to light cities in addition to what we would call fuel, machinery, and whatnot. Okay, so what is oil? Oil is basically, it's a thick black material, okay, and it's thousands of years old. It's essentially when dinosaurs were roaming the earth and whatnot, and other animals and creatures over the years, when they died, and they were buried, their organic material essentially got put under a lot of pressure when it was under, and it just sort of evolved into this material. It's a really strange process, but it's essentially it's an organic material that's thousands of years old, and there's oceans of it underneath the earth. Okay? And so oil is first discovered in Texas. Let me back up here. All right, so in 1900 and 1901, two events involving water and oil had an impact in southeast Texas. Okay, this is going to usher in that new era, the age of oil. Now, this 1900 water event is referring to that 1900 hurricane. Okay, when the major oil discovery happens in Texas, it is going to happen right off of the heels of that 1900 hurricane. That's why we covered it last week. Okay, so this says that oil was discovered in 1900, only 100 miles from Galveston. In reality, oil was discovered in 1894 in Corsicana, Texas. And I'll show you where Corsicana is once I get it over here. Okay. So this is where Corsicana is. Okay, it's a little south of Texas. It's a little south of Dallas. It's north of Houston. It's right there. All right. This oil is going to be discovered here, and they're going to set up what they call a refinery. Okay? So when they find the oil, you have to basically break it down for it to be useful. Okay? It goes through a process called refining, and they are able to take the oil, they turn it into fuel. Okay? It's a long process. And this guy right here, Joseph C. Cullinan, he is going to be the guy that sets this up in Texas. It's going to be the first Corsicana, Texas is going to have the first oil refinery west of the Mississippi River. He also pioneered the use of natural gas, which is a similar organic material, to heat homes, provide lighting, and locomotives. However, this is a lot more difficult to access at this time. But he's really going to usher in a lot of what we call prospecting in Texas. And when I say prospecting, I mean those are people who are coming in from other states across the United States to try to find oil. Now, the big event that's going to happen is going to occur in a place called Beaumont, Texas. All right? Spindletop. We've watched a video on this before, but I'm going to explain a little bit further, okay? So January 10th, 1901, remember that hurricane hit in September 8th of 1900. So this is not even 4 months after that hurricane. Okay, there's a place that's called Spindletop. It's south of Beaumont, Texas. Beaumont is just outside of Houston. And it was these two Croatian immigrant brothers who were prospecting, and they built this material. And as they were drilling, they were looking around for different areas. They couldn't find it. They were actually about to give up hope of finding oil in this area when one day they just struck this massive ocean of oil. And this is an actual picture of that Spindletop derrick, an oil derrick. When I say oil derrick, I'm referring to this structure right here. It's this wooden structure, and it basically allows for a large drill to be dropped at a higher height and penetrate deeper into the ground. And when they did that, they hit this massive pressurized ocean of oil, and it shot the oil straight out of the derrick. And it just kept going. It did not stop. It kept going for, I would say, at least several days. And it was shooting out, as it says right here, about 100,000 barrels of oil per day until it was capped 9 days later. And when they say capped, what they mean is they had to collapse the oil. They had to essentially blow up this part to keep the oil from shooting out. But this is a gold mine. And to this day, it's probably one of the most significant oil discoveries in the world. And it's going to bring Texas into a whole other level of growth. Okay, remember at this time, a lot of Texas is agriculture. Okay, most people are making their money through cotton, through farming, cattle. This is going to bring in another industry. Okay. All right, so here's a good picture of what we call a boom town. Okay, so overnight Beaumont transformed. It went from being this small three houses, 2 buildings, and overnight it almost transformed into this massive town. We call these places boom towns. All right, now boom towns are going to lead to a lot of people. Essentially, what it is when you have a small town, oil is discovered there, thousands of people flock into that small town to try to set up shop. Okay, it's the same thing as the California gold rush. And if you guys remember, I told you the people who made the most money during the gold rushes, it wasn't the miners, it wasn't the people looking for gold. It was the people who set up shops like grocery stores and tools and equipment, blacksmiths. These are going to be the ones who are making the most money out of this. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later when we get into other industries that develop with that oil industry. Okay, so companies are going to form too, companies that are still around to this day. Okay, the Texas company is going to transform itself into Texaco. Some of you guys have seen their star and their red letters of the gas stations around. That's Texaco. All right, and population of Beaumont. Remember, Beaumont is the town that was just outside of where Spindletop was discovered, and it's going to grow from about 9,000 people to over 50,000. All right, I'm going to go back to this picture and show you right here. This is Spindletop, October 6, 1902. And you see here all of these oil derricks just stacked one on top of the other, all of them looking for oil in the same area. This right here is basically a storage tank for oil. And a couple other pictures I kind of want to show you guys. Let me see. Right here. Okay, so this is another example of people trying to drill for oil. This is a good picture of some of the oil derricks. This little shaft right here is basically the drill, and it would lift up. And we have other modernized ways of doing it, and I'll show you what that looks like up here. Right here. This is the modern one where they sort of rock back and forth and they're constantly pulling it down. You guys can look at this picture later. Just pause the video. Okay. So here's our oil fields during the age of oil. You can see how many just popped up. So to give you an idea of where Spindletop is, it's right here. This is Houston right here. It says Goose Creek, but that's where the oil derrick was at. So Spindletop is just to the east of Houston. And this is another what we call a density chart of the population. And you can see how quickly it grew in Corsicana and these areas. Okay. Let me get back over here. All right, so what was it like to live in a boomtown? This doesn't look very inviting, does it? It's like people just stacked on one another, muddy streets. They're very noisy, they're dirty, they're crowded, and probably, and this says sometimes dangerous, I'd say it was dangerous a lot of time. Remember, just like during the cattle industry, places like Fort Worth and Hell's Half Acre, it's going to attract all kinds of people, and other, less than legal businesses are going to pop up, okay? Not only that, I don't know if you guys have ever smelled oil when it's coming out of the ground, but it's very potent. It makes you very lightheaded. And so while they're pulling up all these oil derricks are pulling up oil, you've got these fumes that are just spreading across these boom towns. A new settlement near the refinery, that Spindletop refinery, joined with Goose Creek and Pelly to become the prosperous Baytown. So some of these boom towns are going to eventually develop into actual cities that we have today. Now, to get to one of the most significant cities that are developed, here's another oil company, probably one of the most famous ones on earth at this point, there's a place called Humble, Texas. Okay? Humble, Texas. And it is going, in 1904, a massive oil ocean is discovered underneath there. And Humble Oil Company develops out of this, and they are going to eventually change their name to ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil is one of the largest oil manufacturers in the world, and it started right here in Texas. Now, Houston. Remember, I told you that after that Galveston hurricane, all these businesses went north to Houston. Okay? A lot of Houston's growth can be traced back to this oil boom in the early 1900s. Okay? It's going to become the center of the oil business industry, not just for Texas, but the entire United States. Houston is going to be where all oil businesses are going to go. Remember, we now have this massive Houston shipping channel, which opens completely in, which opens completely in 1914. And this is going to cause a lot of ships to be able to come into Houston, collect oil, and then move off. Petroleum, which is just another word for oil. Companies that need banking, insurance, transportation, legal services. All of these companies are going to headquarter themselves in Houston. Okay, so another industry that's going to develop during this time is the lumber industry. Lumber is just wood. Okay, in East Texas, we have a lot of forest. Remember, we call it the piney woods, as it says right there. So to build all these new cities and towns that are these boom towns that are popping up, you need wood. Okay, where are we going to get wood? Well, most of our forests are in East Texas, and so alongside with that oil boom, there's going to be a lumber boom. Okay, a lot of people moving into these forests, cutting down trees, almost to the point where you have massive deforestation, the removal of trees and forests. And a lot of the areas actually got transformed into farmland. And you can see that to this day when you leave out of Dallas going east. You can just see a lot of flat areas. That used to all be forests, okay? But then it got transformed into farmland during this time, okay? So like I said, you need lumber to build oil derricks. You need lumber to build buildings. You need lumber for just about everything you can imagine. Okay, so this is kind of what I was talking about. This land is, you have thousands of acres that are being deforested, and they're being converted into farmland. So this is actually opening up other job opportunities for people. But during this time, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more next week, we have something called the Progressive Era going on. And I don't want to spend too much time on it, but basically what the Progressive Era is it's kind of this massive nationwide movement to sort of bring people into a different way of thinking. Okay, let's not just, destroy the environment and try to make as much money. We need to be thinking about the future. We need to be thinking about what our actions are causing here. And so we have movements, conservation movements like this guy, W. Goodrich Jones, who really advocated the replanting of trees. If you're going to cut down a tree, plant two in its place. Okay, and some other industries, brick making. Texas soil is really notorious for having a lot of clay in it, and so the clay is going to be dug up and used to create bricks. That's why when you look at a lot of old buildings in Texas, ones that were built at this time, a lot of them have that red brick, and that is because of the clay, the iron content in the clay is going to give you that red brick color. Okay, Dallas. So we have Houston in the south, and let me pull up this map one more time. Here we go. So remember, we have Houston in the south. This is going to become the headquarters for all oil in the United States, pretty much. But you still have, if you remember that other image, you still have tons of oil deposits all across Texas. Okay, out here in West Texas, where the mouse cursor is right now, to this day, this area is still producing massive amounts of oil. All right, but Dallas is going to develop a lot during this time. It's going to become a sort of a second headquarters to Houston for oil companies. We need something in Central Texas to sort of help regulate this oil that's coming in and out of Texas in the central part. So Dallas is going to develop during this time, but it's also going to lead to another major industry that's going to come out of Dallas, and that's retail. Okay, retail it can be anything from clothes to furniture, just about anything you can imagine. Okay, so Dallas becomes the center for shipping and storing cotton and other goods. So you have a warehouse industry in Texas. You have the railroads coming through this area. And overall, Dallas turns into what we call a white-collar city. When I say white-collar, we're talking about jobs that don't demand physical labor. Okay, those kinds of jobs are called blue-collar. Farmers are blue-collar jobs. Working in a factory is a blue-collar job. White-collar, these are your desk jobs. These are going to be your guys that are taking care of the insurance and the banking. Okay. And during this time in 1907, a company called Neiman Marcus is going to emerge as kind of that dominant retail store in Dallas. And over the next century, it's going to become one of the biggest and most famous department stores. All right. So that's going to close out Age of Oil. The overall point I want to make here is that the oil industry brought a lot of wealth to Texas. Oil obviously is worth a lot of money to this day, and it brought a lot of wealth to Texas. However, other factors happened. Okay, oil is discovered. You have thousands of people, thousands of immigrants coming into Texas, and as a result, more companies are going to open up. Other industries are going to take advantage of the situation and develop. Okay, so it's not just oil bringing money in. Okay, you've also got the lumber industry. You've got brick making, you've got the retail industry. All of these different industries are reacting to this oil discovery. And that's going to conclude the lecture for the week.